Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the third meeting of the Interim Joint Committee on Transportation. Before we do the roll call, those of you who are attending remotely, when you logged into the meeting, you were muted. So if you want to speak, you'll have to unmute the mic. For those by video conference, when you answer the roll call, please specify if you are in your office in Frankfort or in your home district. And if you're attending remotely and would like to be recognized, please use the chat function on the app to send a message to our staff who will be monitoring during the meeting, and we'll get to you in order, get you in the queue. And all of today's meeting material is on the LRC website. So at this time, I'd ask Madam Secretary to please call the roll.
Senator Berg.
Present in district.
Senator Embry.
Present in the room.
Senator Hornback. Senator Smith. Senator Storm. Senator Turner.
Present in the room.
Senator Wheeler.
Present in the district.
Senator Wilson. Senator Wise.
Present in the room.
Senator Yates.
Present from district.
Representative Bojanowski.
Present in the room.
Representative Branscombe.
Present from district.
Representative Bratcher.
Present in the room.
Representative Bridges.
Present in the room.
Representative Dixon.
Present in the district.
Representative Fleming.
Present in the room.
Representative Goforth.
Present in the district.
Representative Hale.
Present in the room.
Representative Heverin.
Present in the room.
Representative Regina Huff.
Joining you outside of my district.
Representative Thomas Huff.
Present in the district.
Representative Lewis.
Present in the room.
Representative Maddox.
Present from my district.
Representative McCool.
Present in the room.
Representative McPherson.
Present in the room.
Representative Miller.
Here in the room.
Representative Santoro.
Present in the room.
Representative Smith.
Present in the room.
Representative Stevenson.
Present in the district.
Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Present from my annex office in Frankfort.
Representative Thomas.
Present in the room.
Representative Westrom. Representative Wheatley.
Here in the room.
Chairman Co-Chair Higdon.
Here and outside my district.
Chairman Upchurch.
Here. Present in the room. Thank you. We do have a quorum. We're duly constituted to do business. Some of you may have noticed that there was a name missing today from our roll call. Representative Bam Carney was a member of this interim joint committee, and we all know the great loss that we suffered with his passing a couple of weeks ago. Bam was a dear friend and colleague, and if you knew Bam, you knew he was a shining star among us. So at this time, I'd like to just take a moment of silence. Thank you. First item on our agenda today is an update of the implementation of the new motor vehicle information system. Actually, before we do that, let's approve the minutes. Do I have a motion? Got a motion? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. Now we'll get to the implementation of the new motor vehicle information system known as CAVIS. We have with us today Heather Stout, the Executive Director of the KYTC Office of Information Technology, and John Eiler, Project Manager. So are you all with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
All right. The screen and the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Hopefully everybody can see the CAVIS program update slide. Is that true?
Yes.
Outstanding. First and foremost, I wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to come in here and give a program update on CAVIS. You know, and on behalf of Heather Stout, the Executive Director, and myself, just thank you for that. Also, I know that, you know, time is of the essence, so I'll go through a lot of these slides. I provided them ahead of time so that you all could read some of the content, because I know that ultimately what you all want to see is how is the CAVIS program doing? Are we going to meet our objectives? Are we going to be able to afford to obtain those objectives? And are we going to get this to the citizens of the Commonwealth? And so hopefully at the end of this, we'll be able to answer all those questions. And then if you have any questions along the way, I'll try to answer them as best as I can. With that being said, the overview, we're going to kind of talk about the project update, review some of the high level benefits of what CAVIS is and what it's going to provide to the Commonwealth, our present and future modules, and then the budget review. So CAVIS overall is an application that we're building to replace a legacy mainframe application that is currently unsupportable in terms of having a long lifespan. We've worked on this for a few years now, and we're getting really close to actually implementing this full solution. The next module that we plan on working on or plan on completing is actually the one that will completely decommission that legacy mainframe application. And what that means is that the application that every county clerk currently uses to issue titles and registrations for all vehicle types will be turned off, and all of that functionality will move on to the CAVIS platform. We are building this in an incremental and iterative fashion. So incrementally, we're delivering functionality to the end users, and they're able to use that while they're also leveraging the old system. And that way they're getting acclimated to the new system. They're learning how to use it. And whenever we actually go to pull in those last vehicle sets, they'll be acclimated and ready to take on that new functionality. So far, we've actually implemented quite a few modules. We presented that last time, and we provided that in the update. And you can see here, we've done the print on demand decal, which we implemented in May 2015, web renewals, which have increasingly became more beneficial to the end users. Throughout the pandemic, a lot of the times citizens could not go on into the office. So they leverage web renewals, and that's grown exponentially over the past 15 to 18 months and allowed people to remain safe at home while also renewing their vehicles. So that has increased, and the buy-in from the county clerks has increased as well on that. So that's becoming more integral into the actual day-to-day operations of the county clerk's offices. Now that we're kind of in this hybrid environment where people want to do more things from their home. We've also implemented the disabled placard implementation and the enhancements to that. We did the statewide point of sale, which is in March 2018, in which we got every county clerk and every county in the Commonwealth onto one single platform so that they could perform all of their point of sale transactions through one single supportable application. We built out that vehicle foundation in 2019 with the first implementation of our boats release. And currently every county and every boat in the Commonwealth are going through our application. And the reason why that's significant is because that's proving out our title and registration functionality that we've built, as well as ensured that we've covered all of our necessary end users, such as the motor vehicle licensing, Kentucky State Police, Fish and Wildlife, Department of Revenue, property value administrators, and audit. So all of those people were working with us to build out that functionality and to build out that framework, because ultimately what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're setting the framework and the foundation of this application to be successful whenever we bring in the lion's share of that functionality, whenever we launch the rest of the vehicle types, which are the more commonly used ones like cars, trucks, motorcycles, mobile homes, trailers, etc. Because we don't want to push something that's brand new out to the end users without them being acclimated, having it adopted, and having a tried and true solution in place. Next, we implemented the flat plate solution. We decommissioned the old Avis inventory solution, and we built out a new inventory solution that we're going to leverage with Cavis. We implemented the flat plate solution, which will be totally integrated into the Cavis application seamlessly. And then now our last focus is just on that last module. So I know a lot of the representatives and senators have been part of this process. You've seen a lot of the deliverables that we provided, but we only have one more large module to go before we fully implement Cavis and decommission the mainframe application. So with that being said, I'm going to move on. That's kind of a high level of the things that we've accomplished this far. We've kind of talked about the standardization, and I hit on it with the point of sale solution and having everybody on that same solution. The ability to support 120 counties, the ability to provide guidance and training and just hands-on engagement with every county equally is really a key guiding principle of this entire operation. That's why we need to standardize what we're trying to give to them. So whenever we pulled everyone together on that point of sale solution, it started building those relationships up to say, you know, we're all going to operate in kind of a same general standard operating procedure. And so whenever they call in to get support or to get guidance or to figure out issues or concerns, we're able to speak with one voice on the solution that they need. And that really reduces the tact time between problem and solution. And it also creates a lot of confidence because they're getting the same answers every time. With a disparate system, you understand that there's a lot of problems that could happen if different counties are using different flavors of the system. And so the answers won't always be the same. Well, that standard ethos in which we're operating with the point of sale solution goes through the entire Cavis application. So everybody's getting the same solution. Everybody should get the same business processes, and everybody should be able to leverage that at the same time. And so whether it's non-sufficient funds or end of day reconciliations or midday sweeps, the standard operating procedures for the clerks are generally the same. And what I mean by generally, obviously there's counties out there that are larger and smaller. They require some configurations and customizations to their needs, but we really focus on making sure that they have the same product and the same operations, the same flows, so that they all understand that, you know, whether or not the process doesn't change just based on their size, it changes on their needs of their office, and it's all configured very similarly. What that also does with standardization is that it increases the ability for those frontline clerks to learn and understand what they're doing so they can provide a better service to that citizen of the Commonwealth. They can go in and everybody operates the same way, so we can provide all that training, we can provide all that awareness. They understand that their peers and colleagues that are next to them have been doing the same job, and it's intuitive, and they can actually take on responsibility sooner on their onboarding. And that's one of the huge gains that we saw whenever we implemented the boats module. People understood that we built a system that is very intuitive and understandable. And if we push things to the top of the screen so that you read from the top to the bottom, very, very common practices among user interface. But it just makes it so much easier for people to go in there and understand what they're trying to accomplish, because this system is a a citizen facing application. And one of the primary responsibilities that we've taken on with the Cavis team is to build a system that allows that clerk to provide the best experience to that citizen, because it's critically important to make sure that we can serve our citizens. And while I know that this is just an application, but it's a tool that the clerk has to use to be able to serve that citizen. And we take that really seriously, and we put a lot of time and effort to make sure that that is something that we can do. Also with data integrity, we talked about data quite a bit. We talked about in previous sessions, we talked about how we're taking the vehicle-centric model and moving it to a customer-centric model. The customer-centric model is really just like any other application that you use today, where you log on and you have all of your information. We're doing that with Cavis. So whenever a citizen comes into the Commonwealth or county clerk's office, they can see all of their vehicles. They can see their cars, trucks, motorcycles, disabled placards, mobile homes, anything that is under their customer record. They'll be able to see it. They'll be able to act on it. They'll be able to have awareness raised on when they need to take an action, or if they're delinquent, or if they have something coming up, so they can plan and have that information ready for them. Also, we'll be able to validate that information because we scan driver's license every day. Scan driver's license to validate that customer, to lock down that information. And that not only helps with data validity, but it also decreases fraud, whether it's intentional or not intentional. Sometimes information isn't the cleanest in the legacy system. So whenever we go to a customer-centric model and we start putting customers together, we make sure that all that information that is PII or personally identifiable information is locked down to that one customer, and they're able to act on that one record, as opposed to having disparate records where there could be interpretation of that information. We lock that down and make sure that they can't change that unless it goes through the proper channels, and that you can't just go around it, so to speak. So we lock down those business flows as well, so that it really forces the proper protocol to take the appropriate actions. And then lastly, we kind of talked about the customer accounts being linked and merged. There's millions and millions of records out there from the legacy system. A lot of that information we're doing a data cleansing and conversion effort on. And what that means is basically from, whenever the legacy system was built in the early 80s, data has been accumulating. And over that time, we're taking those records and making sure that they're pertinent, making sure that they're active if they need to be active, making sure that they're combined where they need to be combined. And then we're also building out processes, because a computer can't do everything, and we don't expect it to do everything. We also built processes so the county clerk can actually take actions and merge those records and standardize those records as well. So we tackled that problem in multiple different facets. Next, this is really some nice information regarding the last fiscal year. But first, I guess I can talk about the efficiency and effectiveness. I've hit a little bit on this about the efficiency and effectiveness, but along with modernizing the solution and building out Cavis so that this application is supportable, that it can last into the future, that whenever there's changes that come along through statute changes or whatever the case may be, Cavis can accommodate those changes in a more robust, in a more efficient, and a more reliable manner than the legacy can today. But also what this does is we had the opportunity to go through and look at all the business processes that the county clerks go through. And we were able to ask multiple questions like, why is this happening today? Why do you do it a certain way? Why are you doing it that way today? And we were able to actually not only just modernize the system, but modernize their business processes. And what that does is it saves time. It saves headache. It saves wasted effort. And so we're looking at reduction in time for title application and title receipt to the citizen. So we're reducing that time frame from the time that the customer comes into the office to get their new title to whenever they get that transfer title in their hand. We're also decreasing that clerk onboarding. Whenever somebody gets hired, it normally takes 3 to 6 months to get them to the point where they can actually sit on the front line. We can do that on the same day. We're also performing validations throughout the process to check the county clerk's work. So instead of waiting to the very end or waiting until there was a mistake captured by a quality check down the line or by someone in Frankfurt, we're actually doing the quality checks throughout the process. Every time they go to a next step, we're validating. Every time that they put in information and then they save that information so they can move on to the next, we're validating that. So that we're trying to stop the problems before they get too far down the road. We're trying to ensure that there's no issues that go past that county clerk, because once it goes past the county clerk, it costs extra time, it costs extra money, and it costs people a lot of heartache and burden, and we don't want to do that. We're increasing the opportunity to identify delinquent taxes and to collect on those unpaid taxes. Just like I said before, we're merging those records. There could be disparate records where people have property, titles to vehicles, cars, trucks, motorcycles that they owe delinquent taxes on, and we'll be able to collect that. We can email receipts. We can, if the citizen agrees to it, we can put their email address in. They can get all that receipt and go paperless. A lot of county clerks have wanted that lately, especially whenever they wanted to be able to send those receipts to citizens they require them that aren't in the office, and we have that ability now. Automated cash drawers, which just reduces the operation fatigue that county clerks have in their office. We're auto assigning tax districts for PVAs, and then one of the main benefits that we didn't really have before is that there's increased visibility across all the organizations. And so what that means is people understand whenever they make an action, or they take an action in a certain area, that it impacts everybody else, because we work in that same ecosystem. And so now it's raising that awareness that whenever MVO does something, it impacts DOR. Or whenever DOR does something, it impacts the clerks. Or whenever a citizen comes in and they have a PVA issue, we created an opportunity where clerks and PVAs can work in the same system in real time to solve those problems, instead of having that citizen go back and forth between offices. And that's just increased efficiency for the citizen, for the clerk, for the PVA. And then also I wanted to show you all some of the information from fiscal year 21. We had almost 4 million receipts. So that means that whenever a citizen comes in and they get a piece of paper, whether they're renewing one vehicle or 100 vehicles, almost 4 million receipts, over 4.6 million citizens served in the Commonwealth through the CAVIS application. Web renewals have increased to $43 million, which is a significant increase over past years. And then our total sales that have been processed through the CAVIS application is over $1 billion. And the reason why that's such a large number is because CAVIS decided whenever we did that point of sale solution, we wanted to be able to filter every single transaction and really lean into that one system mentality. And so we built the point of sale solution that incorporates AVIS and CAVIS until we fully decommission the AVIS application. So out of that $1 billion, you can see that there's still a propensity to check out by check. Almost $700 million worth of checks throughout the Commonwealth. Cash is about 110 million. And then credit cards actually increased about almost 2%, about 1.5% over last year to $129 million. So that's kind of the general overview that we give every time. But I wanted to kind of go into a different view on the project. And that's the project status. So really what a lot of people want to know about CAVIS is, when are you going to be done and are we going to make the targets, right? And I think that's in general what every project manager has asked all the time is, when are you going to be done and are we going to make it within the budget? And are you going to deliver everything that you said you're going to deliver? So the chart on the right is the project breakdown based on effort. And I understand that effort may be a unit of measure that a lot of people aren't accustomed to, but I wanted to be able to use this so I could kind of illustrate and give a visual of, okay, what's left for CAVIS? So every module that we've completed, I aggregated, and that's all in the green colors. What's left is in that red. And basically what we have left is just the remaining vehicle types, but the framework was already built with the previous modules. So right now we have about 28% remaining for the development time. That's about 17 months worth of effort. And our target goal is December 2022. So based on what we need to do is we need to complete the remaining red block within 17 months. And right now, CAVIS is on target to do that. We have 17 months to go. We have about that amount of work left to develop and implement, and our budget meets that expectation as well. So right now we're on target with what we need to accomplish. We have enough minimal viable product to deliver, to turn off the Avis mainframe application, and to get that done within 17 months. The initial allocation for Cavis was about $25 million. The total spend on the previous 3M effort was $9 million. Out of that, we had approximately 15 million, almost 16 million allocated. We had to get an increase of $4 million to be able to finish out the project. But that still puts us well below the initial allocation. So the current team that's working on this, and in thanks to Heather Stout's leadership and giving us the opportunity and the environment to be successful, we're going to be able to complete what we came here to complete, turn off the Avis application with less budget than originally allocated for the previous Cavis project. So we have about 21% of the budget remaining. We have about 17 months to get things done, and we're on track to get that done. We're on time, on target, and within the budget that's currently allocated. I know that I sped through that because I know that you all don't have a whole lot of time, but I just wanted to open it up. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, or things that you might want me to go back over?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions. Can leased vehicles be renewed online with this system now?
Not with the current system, but we're actually working on the leased vehicle. We call it it's just a leased vehicle team, and they're currently going through that stuff, those requirements right now.
Okay, so do you think that'll be something that's coming pretty soon, or?
That's within our scope, yes.
Okay.
Are you talking about through web renewal?
Yes, online renewal, yes.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay. I'm actually not certain if leased vehicles can be renewed online, but I haven't heard that that's a restriction. So we'll have to check on that and get back to you.
Okay. And then just get back with us on that. And then on an entirely different subject, on online paperless titles. I'm assuming once we get this program up and going, sometime after 2022, that will be the next step, is to be able to go to paperless title.
Yes, that is definitely
Or
in
a
the
next step, not
pipeline
necessarily the
of-
next step, but a next step that we need to take.
Yes, there are a lot of additional services that we're going to be able to do after we get Cavis completed. It's going to open up the door for us to be able to offer additional things, and paperless titles is something that's been discussed for years now, and I definitely think that's going to be a big topic of conversation once we get Cavis completed.
Okay, thank you. I've got some folks in the queue here. Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for the presentation. It's good to hear from you on the Cavis system, and hopefully that timeline holds true. I do have one question for you. A former constituent of mine in Mercer County, and a former state employee, and I think many people on the committee have heard from him. He tells me consistently and that we have a lot of lost revenue from unregistered vehicles that they reside in Kentucky, but they're registered in other states. When this Cavis is in full capacity, and you're trading information with all those other silos, revenue and these other folks, will you be able to track some of those folks down if there is truly someone who hasn't paid their that lives in Kentucky but do not have their vehicle registered in Kentucky?
You want to take that, John?
Yes. So that's a lofty question without all the other full details, but I can tell you maybe this will help answer some of it. We do have interfaces with AMVA, with Nimvitas, with different with the thing called intelligence. And so what that does is if that other state shares information with us and somebody comes into the office and they don't live, or they live in Kentucky and their vehicle is registered in Ohio, like we would be able to know if they have that going on, if that state shares that information.
Yeah, and to add to that, the data that we're going to be able to pull from the new CAVIS system and the reporting is going to enable us to do a lot more analytics. So we can always work with surrounding states potentially, and be able to kind of identify some things like that with revenue as well. I know they used to have a program called the Freddie Freeroader program. I think that's very similar to what you're talking about, where they live in Kentucky, but they're registering their vehicle in another state. So I think there is going to be a lot more opportunity once this system goes live and we have all of the data at our fingertips to be able to identify areas where we need to focus our attention.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you making that a priority. I don't want to do unfair taxes, but it's not, I guess it's proper to ask somebody to pay their fair share if they're living and driving that car in Kentucky, that they registered in Kentucky.
Thank you, Senator Higdon. Do you have anything else?
No, sir, I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next up is Representative Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. You, Mr. Chair, referenced the online paperless auto liens, and my question is, do you have any idea what the cost savings would be? Have you looked into that as far as the efficiencies and the process? We go to what I would consider a real-time system, and I'm assuming CAVIS has that capabilities.
We haven't completed a cost benefit analysis on the auto liens and that automation or going to paperless like e-title or anything like that yet. Right now, our primary focus was to turn off the mainframe application. And then as Heather Stout mentioned earlier, there is a list of post turning off the mainframe items that we would look into, and e-titling and lien management and things like that are on that list. Especially whenever you're talking about paperless and automated.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
One other question. You had mentioned the auto assigning of districts and the standardization of the counties. Just wondering when it comes to titling an automobile, I know now if I want it titled in my county, it has to be sent to my county to be titled. If I were to buy a car in Louisville and I live in Paducah, is there a way to synchronize that to where the auto dealer or the purchaser could do it in the county they're at, and it still be assigned to the other counties since we will have the auto assigning of tax districts, and those specific counties be able to receive their fees, like they should?
We have discussed that. Go ahead, Heather. Sorry.
I was just going to say, there's been a lot of discussion about that in years past, and I believe the way that the system functions now and what it requires or which county it's required is all based on statute. So I think there may have to be some further discussion on whether or not those statutes are revised in order to allow people from one county to title and register in another and then still distribute the fees accordingly. The system can definitely do the fee distribution as needed. But I think there's just some rules that prevent some of that from happening based on my understanding.
Thank you. I appreciate your work on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next is Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony today. A constituent reached out to me a while back, but I just want to make sure I'm on the right page here. The current system, it recently went through a shutdown, didn't it?
Yes.
Okay. What was the reason for the shutdown, and what was the impact of it?
John, you want to take that?
Sure. So the reason for the shutdown is that whenever we talk about the shutdown, that was actually on the legacy system, the one that we're trying to move away from. And it kind of goes back to the point that I was talking about earlier, is that the system was built, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but the system was built in the early 80s, and it's very complex in how it's built. And so whenever we went to make changes to that, the teams that were working on that, although they tested and everything passed, there were certain things that did not get captured or didn't work whenever we promoted that to production. So they had to go through and actually build out a team to address that, and they worked diligently to get that done. But ultimately what was happening is that the legacy system is not friendly to work on, and there's a lot of issues with it's very cumbersome. And that is one of the driving factors on why we need to get CAVIS completed, because it's just really tough to keep up with changes whenever you're working on a mainframe application that is hard to support. There's not very many people that can even do that anymore. There's no talent left in the workforce to be able to work on those changes. And again, that just makes this program, CAVIS, so important. And the impact was, I think some of the offices stayed open and some of them decided to close, unfortunately.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Which offices ended up closing because of this?
I would have to get back to you on that, Representative.
Thank you.
Unless Heather knows. So.
Yeah, I honestly think a large majority ended up closing. There were a few that tried to remain open based on what we heard from them to see if they were able to get some transactions through. I think some of the issues were based on volume of transactions from a performance standpoint. So some of the offices that stayed open found that since so many closed, they were then able to do some transactions without a problem. So once we got that resolved, though, and identified the primary issue, they were all able to reopen, by the end of that week.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John and Heather, thank you very much for talking to us today. And I'm trying to catch up on what y'all been doing for some time, and I appreciate the laborious process. And I've gone through some conversions in the past, and it's not an easy task, particularly when you're dealing with around $25 million of work to be done. But I have hopefully a question you might be able to answer. If not, direct me in the right direction, because like I said, I'm trying to catch up. But I had a constituent went in and he totaled his car to get a salvage title, and the clerk took his tag and he was out of any title and he couldn't drive anything, even though he got the car fixed fairly quickly, even though it was total, which was still beyond me. I'd like to get that bodywork guy. But in any event, what you're doing is this help expedite, instead of him waiting for 3 weeks and had to go to Frankfurt to get all that information processed? Will this help expedite that process, or is that something totally different?
It sounds like what you're talking about is the rebuilt process. Typically, vehicles that are totaled and then they go through a rebuilt process do take extra time because they have to review pictures of all of the work that's performed and verify that it's performed according to safety and things like that. There may be an improvement in the speed just from getting that information to our rebuilt staff. It's all going to be electronic and things like that, but I'm not sure how long their process takes once they receive the information.
Okay. If you could just let me know or send me an email on who I can talk to get a little more clarification, I appreciate it.
Right. The director is Godwin Anadu, and I'll send you that name.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. No more questions? Heather, John, thank you for your presentation today. Very informative. John, your back wall reminds me of my refrigerator at home. The Post-it notes are help keep me on task because my wife is always giving me something to do, so that's where I go to look.
Yes, sir, it works.
Thank
Well,
you,
I'm not going to say it works at home.
Yes, sir.
It's the reason I stay in trouble all the time. All right, well, thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Robin Brewer is going to give us an update on the final report of the road fund. Robin, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can certainly hear you.
Okay.
You may proceed.
All right. Okay, so I have a pretty short presentation here, and I know you all are going to be looking at it online as I go. So if you want to go ahead and turn to slide 2. So as you know, the committee is obviously very aware. The last 2 legislative sessions, you all have had to prepare a 1-year budget each year instead of a biennial budget as you're used to, all due to the uncertainty of COVID. And because of that, the Consensus Forecasting Group, or the CFG, has also had to come in multiple times over the course of the last couple of years. And so they did meet back in December of 2020. And the purpose of that was to revise the enacted revenue estimate for FY 2021, which was the current fiscal year, and also to revise their revenue estimate for 2022, all in preparation of the legislative session that was coming up in January. So during that December meeting, the CFG revised the 2021 revenue estimate up about $34 million from $1,543,400,000 to $1,577,700,000. Actual road fund revenues for 2021 came in at $1,642,300,000. So that's an increase of 10.1% from the previous fiscal year, after last year's 4.8% drop due to the large decline in vehicle travel and sales due to COVID. So this surplus has resulted in $64.6 million more than the budgeted estimate. Motor fuel tax revenue collected was $7.8 million less than the enacted revenue estimate. Motor vehicle usage tax revenue collected, which is the sales tax on vehicle purchases, was $52.3 million more than the estimate. And then the other component of our revenues collected were $20.3 million more than the estimate. 5 of the 7 of the forecasted road fund accounts were above estimated levels. And the $64.6 million surplus has been deposited into the road fund surplus account. Next slide. So as expected, total road fund collections were tepid for the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year before taking off in the final 3 months of the year. Much of the 4th quarter increase was a result of depressed collections in FY 2020 as the pandemic severely limited economic activity. Growth rates for the 4 quarters were 1.9%, 0.7%, negative 0.4%, and 43.8%. Road fund receipts had a record-breaking 4th quarter with total collections of $466.7 million. This surpassed the previous high of $424.8 million from the final quarter of FY19. Revenues were $142.1 million greater than in the same quarter last year. There were gains in most categories. Collections in the 2 largest categories, which are motor fuels and motor vehicle usage taxes, increased 24.5% and 80.9% respectively. It was expected that there would be a substantial revenue increase in the 4th quarter given the problems faced last year from the coronavirus. In the final quarter of FY20, receipts fell by just over $100 million as the effects of the pandemic effectively shut down the economy. The sharp increase in the 4th quarter of FY 2021 enabled total road fund revenues to end the year up 10.1% over 2020 totals. Next slide. So comparing actual road fund revenues for 2021 to 2020, the The total 2021 receipts were 150.8 million more than 2020. Motor fuel tax receipts increased 0.9% for the year. They declined in each of the first 3 quarters and stood at negative 5.6% through 9 months, as Kentuckians limited their travel and more people opted to work from home, before finally rebounding in the fourth quarter as people began to resume travel and return to the workplace. Motor vehicle usage tax receipts were strong throughout the year. Collections in this account grew by double digits in 3 of the 4 quarters, and revenues in this account reached an all-time high of $620.9 million. The surge in auto sales was aided by pent-up demand as well as federal stimulus payments. The $121.6 million increase in the motor vehicle usage receipts accounted for about 80% of the road fund's annual increase. Motor vehicle license receipts increased $16.9 million, while motor vehicle operators' receipts rose by $9.1 million. Investment income fell by $6.8 million, while other income grew $3.5 million. Next slide. The official enacted road fund revenue estimate for 2022 is $1,609,200,000, for which the budget was enacted in April. The motor fuel tax rate has been set again at the statutory floor for all of FY 2022. According to the quarterly economic and revenue report for the 4th quarter of FY 2021 from the Office of the State Budget Director, road fund revenues are forecasted to return to a more normal growth pattern after 2 years of large quarterly fluctuations. It's estimated that revenues will grow 4.6% over the first 9 months of 2022. Motor fuel tax receipts are expected to increase 6.2% over the first 9 months of 2022. A shift from the work-at-home model to a return to the office for many workers should propel the demand for gasoline with more commuter travel. In addition, pent-up demand for leisure travel accumulated during the pandemic should also create additional recreational travel. Motor vehicle usage taxes are forecasted to increase 2.8% over the first 3 quarters of FY 2022. While collections in this account were extremely strong in 2021, and expectations are that automobile sales will cool off, receipts in this account are still anticipated to increase in the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year. Motor vehicle license fees are expected to increase 1.3%. Weight distance taxes are expected to grow 7.6%. Motor vehicle operators license are forecasted to rise 11.1%. And the other category is expected to increase about 0.6%. Next slide. So this slide is a slide that you all have probably already seen before. I've shown it multiple times at other committee meetings. It's just a historical chart of total road fund revenues by fiscal year from 2011 to this last fiscal year, 2021. This slide obviously shows all the things that we've talked about now for years about FY14, before we had the gas tax decline of 6.5 cents. That really started in the late part of FY15, but really we didn't feel the impact of that until 16. So you can see that in the chart. And then, I've mentioned before in FY19, it took us 5 years to get back to the level we were at in collections in FY14. And then obviously COVID hit. So obviously that's reflected in FY 2020. And now we have 2021, which obviously looks like a really good year. But something I just, like to remind you all is, again, the gas tax is at the statutory floor for all of this fiscal year. This will now be the 7th full fiscal year at the statutory floor. or that the gas tax has been at the statutory floor. So, even though we've had some increases, especially this year, and in the prior years, a lot of that was due to primarily the motor vehicle usage tax and just the beyond unprecedented growth that we've seen in that category. This year, with a $64.6 million surplus, $52.3 million of that is the motor vehicle usage tax. So again, we'll be appreciative of that extra revenue, but knowing that, that revenue stream is not likely to remain that way long term. And we still have our largest component, which is the gas tax at the statutory floor. So, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Robin. Do any of the members have any questions? Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Robin. I appreciate you going on the numbers. Just want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly, and I don't know what slide it is, but it's actual versus actual over 20 to 21, and compare that to your estimate for 2022. We were at just close to 1.5 in 20, 1.642 in 21, and go about 1.6. So that's a decrease. Would you consider the budget for the 2022 to be an optimistic or a controlled approach or a pessimistic approach?
Well, that's really probably a question for the Governor's Office of Economic Analysis. They're actually staff to the consensus forecasting group, and they're the ones that run the different scenarios for revenue estimates. I will say, though, that the 2022 estimate was put together back in December of 2020. I think because now we've received this fourth quarter economic and revenue report out of the state budget director's office, I think that they probably feel like this 2022 estimate is probably lower than it should be. So I'm guessing that when the CFG comes in here very soon, they're likely to revise that upward. How much, I don't know the answer to that, but that's the indications that we've seen from the quarterly report that just came out.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. On the motor vehicle usage, can you give me a percentage breakout between new versus used?
I'm not sure if we have the ability to get that information or not. I'll probably have to check with the Department of Revenue. They're the ones that actually collect that revenue for us. I can inquire and see what we can find out.
Okay. And the reason I'm going with that is that obviously there's a tax credit and so forth that's involved in the use portion of it and so forth. So I'm just trying to get a better handle on that. But thanks, Robin. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Tomoville Smith.
Is there a formula that you use on the gas tax for out-of-state vehicles passing through? Is there something that's used to say a certain percentage is brought in out of state on the gas usage tax?
Not for just your passenger vehicle. I believe for motor carriers that, yes, that is tracked through a system that several states use. It's a pretty complicated system. But I do not believe for passenger vehicles. I'm not aware that is tracked.
Do you guys use an estimate, or do you just use it as a whole? Do you have any kind of way of estimating how much is out of state paid into our gas tax?
Not to my knowledge, no. We just look at the types of vehicles, whether, again, like it's a motor carrier, a larger weight vehicle, whether it's diesel or gasoline. Those are the kinds of factors that we look at.
When you do an estimate on the gas tax, if there was an increase in it, say per penny, do you have a formula, or do you have discussions on how much of that would be out of state? I know you're saying it's hard to pin it down, but is that, let's say there was hypothetically a 10-cent increase in the gas tax, do you have a percentage that you would contribute to out of state revenue?
Not that I'm aware of, especially not at a passenger level, not that I'm aware of. No. Again, it's, I think we do look at certain things for motor carriers, especially ones that pay a weight distance tax, because they pay part of the gas tax as well. We can look at different motor carriers and determine which ones are out of state versus which ones are in state. But from a passenger car perspective, no, I don't believe that's what.
So the estimate on 30 million per penny is directly considered in state, or is that as a whole again?
It's as a whole.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Robin, thank you very much for your presentation today. It's always good to have you with us.
Thank you.
So you'll be here more often. All right. Next on the agenda is agency correspondence from KSP and KYTC. You should have found at your seats 2 letters, one from the cabinet, one from KSP, updating us on the progress made towards the regionalized system of driver's license issuance and testing. They're also on the committee website if you don't have them with you. Next is we've been referred a administrative reg. It is 601 KAR 1005, which updates our motor carrier safety regulations by adopting federal regulations for transportation of hazardous materials and other safety issues. There were no questions raised during the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee when they reviewed this regulation. We've got John Johnson from KYTC on Zoom if there are any questions. If not, are there any questions? We have no questions. That is good. The next will be our next meeting will be on Tuesday, September the 7th at 1 p.m. in this room. And thank you all for attending today. Oh, Senator Turner, you wanted to put something on the record, so I'll recognize you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I represent the 4 counties there in eastern Kentucky, and there's some question about the Parkway Road that came up, and I just want the Department of Transportation to know that I've spoken with Representative Lafferty and Hatton, and it's my understanding that we're wanting Senator Turner, Senator Smith, Senator Wheeler, Representative Lafferty, Hatton, Blanton, and Bobby McCool, all in that area, are wanting Transportation Department to take the Parkway and take it on through the mountain there at the Johnson County line and push it on to Floyd County. There's no question that all the representatives and senators in that area, so that, and I talked to Ms. Lafferty, who I saw was on her office here, and just to make that clear, so the Department of Transportation is on board with the recommendations of the body that represents that area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Turner. There being no other further business before us, thank you for attending today. We do now stand adjourned.